Hi, hello, welcome to LearnStroke IAS Classes by Arjun. You're listening to the editorial summaries for IAS with Arjun R Shankar, and our focus is Mission 2023 UPSC exam. And in this editorial summaries, I'll try to handle very important editorials that are very useful for your prelims and mains examination. So that does not include only Hindu, even good editorials from Business Line, Indian Express, and other important newspapers which are very relevant for your UPSC syllabus are actually being analyzed here. So this is set one for 2023 examination. And let's see, the first important editorial that we are discussing is the big tech and the need in India for an ex ante regulation. So what is this article talking about? So what are basically this ex ante regulation? And basically this whole editorial talks about big companies, the big tech companies, and the multi ways in which they are distorting the market universally. So recently, everybody knows the Indian antitrust body, the Competition Commission of India, in October imposed a penalty of 1,337 crores on Google for abusing its dominant position in the Android mobile device ecosystem. So the whole article talks that, anyways, the companies like Google, there are big tech companies which are growing. So when these tech companies grow, in what ways, how are we going to protect the ecosystem where even not only big companies exist but smaller sellers and small companies exist? How are we going to protect them, and what is going to be the impact of these big companies when they grow? So many countries, including the European Union, USA, Australia, are very seriously concerned about this, and that is why everybody says we need to have an ex ante regulation. So let's see. Before we start, let's take two important mains question from GS paper 3, tech and economy. What is open network for digital commerce, ONDC platform? How is it helping the small business players in creating a balance in the business ecosystem? Explain. So this immediately talks about the open network for digital commerce, ONDC platform. And the second question, India needs a new ex ante based framework that promotes competition by ensuring a level playing field for the big, small, the old, and the new. Comment in light of recent issues. So, India also needs an ex ante based framework that promotes competition by ensuring a level playing field. So, let's discuss. We have already given the premise, and what do you mean by ex ante regulation? They are basically, please understand, ex ante regulations are basically regulation based on forecast rather than actual result. So you always have regulations based on the result, but this time we have the regulation based on forecast. So ex ante regulations aim at identifying issues in the market beforehand. Before we get a result, we have a speculation, we have a forecast. Through this framework, regulators tell the stakeholders about the measures and responses they need to adopt even before a problem has occurred. So, with a right forecast, before a problem has come, we need to have a we need to have a right set of solutions ready. So, when I say big India needs an ex ante regulation, means in the wake of big companies, tech companies growing and becoming monopoly, we need to have a strong system where we need to have ex ante type of regulation so that their monopoly and they do not harm the small players and they do not disturb the ecosystem or the equilibrium of the ecosystem that really exists. So the growth of big tech company and the multi ways in which they can distort the market is a concern universally. Many countries, including European Union, USA, and Australia, are seriously concerned. And you should also take that this is India's antitrust body, Competition Commission, has fined Google. Likewise, European Union's Digital Market Act and gatekeepers are basically regulations, are basically the ex ante type of regulations to foresee anti competitive practices. So European Union's Digital Market Act is already ready, and you should know that one of the important another violation is regarding the article. Apart from that, also talks about in India, We have talked about European Union's digital market. In India, we have the Competition Commission under the Indian Competition Act 2002. The aim is to protect and promote competition in market and prevent practices that hinder competition. So in India also, we have the CCI, or the Competition Commission of India, whose basic aim is to create a platform where every trading or every competition is good, neutral, and no particular player gets an upper advantage. So competition is actually regulated by the Competition Commission. Next, the article talks about the predatory pricing. You need to know that big brands like Amazon and Flipkart were accused of what? Deep discounting. What is deep discounting? And they were accused of deep discounting against the local sellers. So imagine that. Just imagine that you have created a e-commerce platform, or a platform very similar to Swiggy or Zomato, where you order food. Just imagine that there is a big company. You only get a small margin by selling this. So what happens when you sell a product of 120 at just 100? So there is just a small margin that you make, but the bigger companies can actually give that whole commodity free of cost for 3 months, because they are big companies. They can actually manage it in the long term. So such predatory pricing, it is called deep discounting. The deep discounting, and even creating small brands to kill small brands, local brands, is actually something done by big companies. So this is why we say that we need to have even in the pricing, we need to have a good system, so that everybody, even the local and small players, are taken care well. And next is the important concept of ONDC. What do you mean by ONDC? It is a network, basically, which is based on an open protocol, and it supports the local commerce across different segments, like, say, grocery, food, delivery, hotel bookings, and to be discovered and engaged by any network enabled application. So I'll explain this whole concept, and it you know how it works. The ONDC platform lies in the middle of the interfaces hosting the buyers and sellers. So it is actually in the middle of the interfaces hosting the buyers and sellers. See, imagine that a buyer searches for an item on Paytm app, from where ONDC has gone live. So you search for an item on the Paytm app where ONDC has gone live. The app will connect to the ONDC platform, which will connect it to seller side interface that will list all the companies from which you can buy the particular item. So just you want to search, it goes to it is connected to the ONDC, and the app will connect to the ONDC platform, which will connect it to the seller side interfaces. And with those interfaces, when you search for a thing, you get all the sellers, all the companies. Say you want to buy imagine you want to buy a table. It will list all the sellers who are selling the same item, so that no monopoly is done. Likewise, this platform cannot say that only show few people who are paid money, or only show these or four number of sellers. It will show all the sellers who are selling that item. So don't you think it's a good thing? So the ONDC is basically it can create new opportunities, and cut down the digital monopoly and support MSME enterprises. It is an initiative by the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, the DPIT, under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. So the again, ONDC is based on open sourced methodology, using open specification, and it has been developed as a counter to the current duopoly in the Indian e-commerce market, which is largely dictated by Amazon and Walmart owned Flipkart. So there's a duopoly like Amazon and Walmart. So ONDC can counter the negative impacts of what they can create in the predatory pricing. And next is regarding the consumer protection angle, because when you such interfaces, technical, everybody basically says that big corporation have the ownership of right to use or transfer the data which are stored on the platform, like financial, phone, medical history. Further, the storage of collection of women and children's data, photograph, should be more cautiously used. So consumer protection is also an important angle. And that is the reason why we say we need to have an ex ante legislation to prevent market failures and mitigate possible anti competitive conduct. So this is why, and Even the Competition Act of 2000, India should definitely have an ex ante legislation to prevent and to create this for finish off all these problems. And even the Competition Act of 2000 was largely constituted to deal with the physical marketplace. So there is an urgent need to amend all these provisions and create new provisions, like create ex ante legislation. Not only physical marketplace, but digital marketplace is also very important. So this whole article is very very important regarding the open network for digital commerce, so ex ante regulations. So read this. So it's a very good article to read on. And the next editorial was regarding the oil, not workers, has pushed inflation in the United States of America. GS paper 3 economy. So obviously what do you mean by inflation. It's a rise in prices, and inflation is not a new thing. And some always economists say that a good level or moderate level of inflation is very good for the economy. But it is basically talking about few things in the US concept, like what do you mean by a capital flight, and what strategies are initiated to deal with capital flight. You should know that capital flight, the article discussed capital flight. Capital flight is the outflow of a capital from a country due to negative monetary policy, currency depreciation, or carry trades in which low interest rate currencies are exchanged for high return asset. So this is what normally happens, is a capital flight will happen. So capital flight is the outflow of capital from a country due to negative monetary policy, currency depreciation, or they will trade the low interest rate currency with higher returns exchange assets. So this is also something that we need to study. And the government adopt various strategies like raising interest rate, signing tax treaty, and many other measures to deal with capital flight. So next time when you see an article regarding capital flight, please understand the outflow of capital. And the next is there is a concept which is talking about what is the wage price spiral and what is capacity utilization. So wage price spiral, you should understand that say we should know that the global economy has seen high inflation since a long time. And you should take a look. Commonly there is an argument that there is a worker. Imagine that there is a worker who is working. The bargaining power of the worker increases with rise in employment. Just slowly visualize that. The bargaining power or his bargaining power of the worker definitely increase with rise in employment. When the employment rises, his bargaining power also increases. So when that happens, this result in the demand for wages, and the wages rises. So the bargaining power of worker increases with rise in employment, and slowly what happens, when that happens, there is a rise in the demand for wages, and automatically wage increases. And what will happen is the price will also increase. So bargaining power of worker increasing, the rise in employment with, and there is a rise in demand for wages increase, prices increase, and that is called as wage price spiral. So this is a concept that has been discussed, wage price spiral. And what is capacity utilization? It is the ratio of what is produced in an economy to the maximum that the current installed capacity can produce. So it's very simple. It is the ratio of what is produced in an economy to the maximum that currently installed capacity can produce. So it's actually it's called capacity utilization. So this article basically talks about this two important concepts which I thought you should know. And next is regarding a very important topic in GS paper 2, health, regarding public health. This whole article talks about public health and how are we approaching the public health. One way is approaching the public health from an individual perspective, and the second is approaching the public health from a society perspective. So this is the base debate, and let's take a mains question. All forms of individualistic approaches in public health are narrowing the healthcare system in India. Critically analyze. So individualistic approach in public health are narrowing the healthcare system. So what do you mean by this? So you need to know the main issue of the article is a failure to examine and interpret public health problems from a population perspective. So you do not treat public health from a population perspective, we always treat it from an individual perspective. And the question also says, uh, it is narrowing down the healthcare system. Definitely, to a large section, it can narrow down the approach. So it's basically the approach of how you see public health. And let's see some of the examples here. And the article also talks about general problems like undernutrition, micronutrient supplementation, the food fortification. We have already discussed what is food fortification and what is the strengthening of PDS, supplementary nutrition program. So it addresses a big issue of nutrition. So these are some of the problems of nutrition and how to overcome that. And there is another question: what is individualism in public health? There is a strong tendency in public health to prioritize individual oriented interventions over societal oriented or population based approaches, which is known as individualism. So, having an individual strategy is individualism, and the rest of this is population or society approach. So, let's see some of the illustration. The Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which is falling under Ayushman Bharat, is the largest health insurance scheme in the country, covering hospitalization, say 5 lakh for a family in a year. The goal is to ensure free curative care services like hospitalization service, no burden on the beneficiary. So, this is a no population centric approach. Instead, the whole focus is given to individual. An individual will get the benefit of this. The individual will get all these benefits like this, these. So, all the schemes that we run in India, majority of them considers the individual and not the society in the large. So this is the basic problem of the editorial that it speaks about. So ideally, the government needs to ensure healthcare facilities around 3 to 5% of the population. So instead of giving an assurance to every individual without ensuring the necessary healthcare services to the population is not really helping a crisis. So even the vaccination approach for COVID-19 was also like this. It was based on an individual perspective. So everything what we do in is actually an individual approach. So the society approach or population approach is very weak that we normally see. So this is what is called as the general form of the public health in India. You need to have an individualistic approach as well as the society or population approach. And we talk about the majority of the it is actually individualistic public health approach. So society needs to be discussed. That is a message that is giving up. And next is regarding the important editorial from Indian Express. These are from Hindu and these are from Indian Express, which is the Bangladesh on Razor's Edge, why India must wake up to the looming economic crisis. So this is nothing but you need to discuss what are the main problems that is happening here. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the opposition party, is demanding a caretaker administration that could ensure electoral transparency, and they want the Awami League, the Sheikh Hasina's party, to come down. So the opposition party, they want to come down. And the crisis, what are the different crises? The complete pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine has dislocated Dhaka's economy to a large extent, because Dhaka is basically a dependent economy, Bangladesh economy. So obviously, people say that Dhaka or Bangladesh can slip into a Sri Lanka-like situation. So Dhaka is very important, and you should see that the last thing that the subcontinent needs is a serious disruption in the livelihoods and hopes of Bangladeshi. And from an Indian perspective, it is going to be very important because GS paper to international relations. Uh, India already has a lot of problems in the East, the Chinese, and even the problems of Indo-Pacific. India has got a lot of problems, and when there is a problem happening in Bangladesh, India will definitely be affected. So another, as you know, that in Sri Lanka, like problem, India is one of the largest creditors or supporters of Sri Lanka financially. So India do not want to have a problem in Bangladesh. So this is the editorial which talks about the Bangladesh crisis. And next is trading to win. This is nothing but a good India-UK free trade is actually being discussed here. So an India-UK, this is also an Indian Express article, an India-UK free trade agreement is a natural step for both of the countries, because bringing two nations is actually a great thing. And Also, I have a you have a main question here. What is a free trade agreement, and how will the free trade agreement between India and UK contribute for a better economy? Discuss. So you know that India and the UK are often described as a living bridge, and since then India has lowered several trade barriers, helping to bring down many more, to double the UK investments. And Indian firms, including established businesses and recent startups, have been finding opportunities in UK also. So both the countries and mentioning, and the biggest example is the car manufacturing McLaren has just opened its showroom in Mumbai. So it's going to be a good thing, and that is why Prime Minister has said that we need to have a zero effect, zero defect policy. By zero defect, the quality of the product has to be very high, and by zero effect, the Prime Minister meant that there should not be any adverse effect on the environment by manufacturing. So the zero defect is also very important. And what is free trade? You need to know what you mean by free trade, because I asked a question, what is a free trade? Free trade is a pact between two countries where the objective is to remove trade barriers of imports, exports. So remove the trade barriers of imports and exports and ensure a hassle free trade relation. So India's free trade negotiation is basically by India wanting to have a free trade agreement. India is getting to, why India needs it, because India wants cheaper access to raw materials, attracting foreign investment, boosting competitiveness, and many other geopolitical reasons. India definitely wants free trade agreement, and the free trade agreement is very different from the preferential trade agreement. So the free trade FTA is different from the preferential trade agreement. FTA is a very comprehensive one covering various areas, while the PTA or the preferential trade agreement is limited to only trade in goods and seek only a tariff elimination in terms of margin preference. So FTA and PTA is totally different. FTA is a comprehensive one, the free trade agreement. PTA is limited, the preferential trade is limited to only trade in goods. So free trade between India and UK is going to be a good thing. So read this question for mains. What is free trade agreement? How will the free trade agreement between India and UK contribute for a better Indian economy? Discuss. GS paper 2, international relations, and GS paper 3, economy. So these are some of the important editorials in set 1. Please do read and learn about this, and we'll come up with another important set 2 of editorial summaries for 2023. Do subscribe the channel for more such videos.